Hi, and welcome to VFX Tutors. I'm Josh, and in this tutorial I'll go through how to create very accurate geometry for your projects using reference images. You can use images taken from your phone, so you don't need a DSLR. You can pretty much use anything that takes a photo, as long as you keep the focal length the same and you don't zoom in, otherwise that'll cause a few problems. But in this case I'll be using images from my DSLR, but you can use anything. The process is exactly the same. So I'm going to open 3DEqualizer. And this time I'm going to do something different. Usually I go to my sequence camera and load in my image sequence, but because we're using reference images, we can either right click and add new reference camera, but that could take quite a while to add in all the reference images. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go 3DE4, File, Import Multiple Reference Frames. So I'm going to select Directory. And it asks for directory. Don't select your images. You need to make sure that you select the directory. So it says just images up here. And you need to take note of what naming you have on this. So my initial naming is IMG for image. It's just how it comes off the camera. So I'm going to select OK. Then for the file filter pattern, I'm just going to put IMG before the asterisk and select OK. And it's not worked. Maybe because I selected that. Ooh. Import multiple reference frames. Directory. Images. Okay, yeah, so it should say, so the directory should just say whatever your thing is, images. It shouldn't have any image there. I think on the previous one I did. And you just type in IMG for the filter pattern and select OK. So now up here, we've got all these reference cameras now, and you can delete your sequence camera. We don't need this. And now you have your reference images. And if you try and scrub through, it's exactly the same as before, where you need to import your buffer compression file or export, but it's different on this one. So to make it so you can go through your reference frames, if you go to playback and import reference camera footage, and that basically does the same thing as the cache. And now we can look through all our images. So we can kind of see we've got lens grids here, which we don't really need. Let's get rid of those ones. So we don't need these last two. So now we should just have one lens grid at the end. You can see the moire effect on that. And now we can see our images. So what we're going to do, we're going to be building really accurate geometry from these reference images. Like, we could probably stick this in some scanning software and it might come up with a reasonable result. But that might be a bit overkill for what we need, because we're probably not going to get any detail from the bricks and maybe not from the windows. Maybe we just need really accurate set geo to work with quickly. Instead of waiting for a scan to process, we can plot points and get the basic outline of all the proportions of this building. So what I'll do, let's go to my lens and we'll set up our lens exactly how we do before on all the other shots. So this was shot on my Canon 5D, and that's a full frame camera. So full frame camera is 26mm, or 24, sorry, by 36. So that's correct. And the focal length was 35. So make sure you put those values in, and you should all be good. So now we're going to go to our lens grid. It's really important that you take a lens grid as well, because then that undistorts your footage and you'll get a much better result. So we'll do exactly what we do before. We'll just do the top points. It should snap in. Go snap. So now we'll fill out this lens grid. It's filled out. Just completely fill it out. Doesn't matter if it goes off, because it will just disable those points anyway. You can delete them if you want. Then we'll just go to calculate distortion and camera geometry, and calculate lens parameters. So now our values are here, so if we set parameters and close, we can see that we can view. Kind of did shoot it a little bit wonky, but that should be fine. So that's straightened out our lens grid. So we don't actually need this lens grid anymore. We could probably go modify and disable it, so it's not being contributed into this how we're going to build this geometry. But now we can see it understorting all our images. And on some of these you can see actually how much of a difference it makes. And that's why it's always really important to work with undistorted footage when you're modeling stuff. Cool. So let's start on our first frame. And this is kind of a similar workflow to how we usually track stuff, but this is more of a how you'd sort of tackle a stereo sort of camera setup, but we'll do it over multiple frames. So let's just get to it, and I'm just going to pick a point. I'm going to pick the corner of this. Just make a normal tracking point. Make sure you're in F2. Going to make a normal tracking point. Control left click. Sorry, but I'm not going to make another point. If you just press right on if you skip through your second frame, make sure you still have this selected. Then roughly click in the same place. So now if you go through these 2 frames, you can see that you've got the same point, but it's marked on 2 frames. We can see we're not quite in the right place, so you want to make sure you're as accurate as possible for this. It might even be worth me picking something that's a little bit easier to sort of see. Let's just stick with that corner for now. And we want to make sure that these... So use your nudge tool to get them right on top of each other. Because the more accurate you get this, the better your model will be. Although it's still going to be pretty good after this, because this is basically manual photogrammetry. But it works really well because you have quite a lot of control over everything. So you know what, I'm actually going to go down and choose this because you can see that a bit clearer on the other ones. So I'm going to go back to my first frame. I'm picking that white patch because it's much easier to quickly find. I'm just going to keep going through the frames. Obviously at some point you might lose it. So that might not have been a good first point to choose from. But we can still see it on this one. Okay, so that wasn't a particularly great example to start on, so let's pick something else. Let's go for the corner of this wall. Or this window frame, sorry. So I'm just going to control left click and make a point there. So I'm just going to go through left click. I'm not making new points, I'm just left clicking and adding it to that reference image. So make sure you get the right window, otherwise you're going to definitely confuse it. I'm just going to go through as many of these. This also helps with if you have slightly bad photos as well. If you've got really bad set photos that you're trying to put through a photogrammetry piece of software like Agisoft and it's not working, this is probably your next best step, because this is just manual photogrammetry and you actually have more control over it because you can do focal length adjustments and change the distortion and adjust for each of the reference frames. You can't really do that in any automated photogrammetry software. So this is quite a useful thing to know, even if you're just modeling or just want to learn. This can be a lifesaver sometimes. So that's come off now. Obviously this does take quite a while, so you have to be quite patient. And use your page up and page down to check if there's a long gap between them. Cool. So I'm just going to go through and do probably all these windows. So I'm just going to make a new tracking point. Then I'm going to go right to my next reference frame, then just left click. I'm not creating a new point. I'm just going to do this for as many as I can. You do need a minimum of 6, so this can be quite time consuming, but it will be worth it because you'll have really accurate geometry. Then your match move will be really easy, and then everything will just work. So yeah, this is just another really useful thing to learn, and it will help you massively. The amount of times that this has got me out of some quite sticky situations when whoever comes off set and they come back with awful reference images. The fact that you can manually do this and not have to worry about some automated process. So I actually put that in the wrong place because there's a window magically appearing there. Let's remove that. So make sure you don't do that. Cool, so I've done that window. I'm just going to always start from the first frame because that's where I seem to be getting most of my best of my footage from. So I'm just going to go through, just doing the same thing over and over. Just gonna. You don't even really have to use your nudge tool. If you've picked a really nice position that you can clearly see, you can probably just get it in there with just left clicking. And then the less you have to sort of nudge around, the quicker you'll get through this. Because if you're having to nudge every single point, that could take quite a long time. But it's just quite satisfying when it finally comes together. It's the same with a lot of things. You need to make sure you still have a lot of overlapping points. Otherwise it just won't work. So go back to that. So that's why I'm kind of systematically working through these windows. So I know if I get all these windows in, I'll probably get a really good solve. Excuse me. And unfortunately it's quite a repetitive task, so there might be a point I'll fast forward through this. Cool, so let's solve that, see what that looks like. And we can see that our points are starting to work quite nicely. It's finding the positions of the cameras really well. And you can sort of see where we're going with this. We're going to start plotting out modeling points. And yeah, it's could take quite a while, but this is just one of the methods that might save you if you get stuck at some point and you don't have any reference or anything good that's coming from a scan, and you just got a couple images. We've got loads of images here, so it should work pretty well, but this will still work with very few. Cool, so I've done quite a few points. I've also plotted out these points here, because once you've started getting good stuff, you want to start thinking about points of modeling. So the more points you get in a relatively correct place for modeling, the easier everything's going to be. So if we go to F2, if we select our corner ones that we've just modelled, it's still quite rough, but if we go to F6, we can see those points. If we go 3D models, create, mesh from points, and select legacy, and just create mesh. Now you can see it's made very basic mesh. If we press F5, if we just full frame for this for now, we can see that's almost working in all those images. There's probably something not quite right going on with this one. It probably needs more points. In fact, actually, we've missed it on that point, so that might actually be it. But you do need lots of points for this to get it working really well. So that's probably because we don't have enough points on that one. What's actually... Oh no, see, I've accidentally put that one on the wrong window. So you have to be really careful, because I've just done that by accident. So make sure you do put it on the right window, otherwise it'll break everything. So now if we use result, if we view all as well, we can see we've got a very odd deviation browser. And this is like the sort of lineup points. So we're still aiming to get this as flat as possible, but sometimes it's just not possible, because this dependence on how accurate we are between our reference points. So now if we just look at our full frame, and if we go for each one, we can see that it's just a plane, but we've really accurately got the position of that wall now. And then we'd continue, we still have all the positions of the windows. So we've got a really good starting point here for modelling really accurate geo. And I'm just going to continue on going through. I'm going to try and model as much of this I can within 3D so we can get the most accurate building. Okay, cool. So I feel like I've got quite a few points. We'll just solve it. Just go to F5. And I've probably fast forwarded quite a lot through this. I think it even stopped recording at one point, and yeah, done quite a bit. So I'm just going to go through. I'm going to select some of these points. You go F6, create mesh from points, legacy. I'm going to start building some of this rough geometry. Perfect. So it's just rough placement geometry, so we can model it a little bit better in Maya, or whatever you're planning on using it. But you can model this in any software. But in here we're just creating the survey. So I actually do need a couple more points. So I'm just trying to build this sort of rough layout and the shape of it, just following these bricks. So I'm going to do some more points. Just some, yeah. You could. This is kind of like a last resort thing. If you can't, obviously, your best bet is to always stick it in some scanning software. But this is good to know, because this can save you a lot of problems sometimes. There's a lot of repeating patterns, so it can be quite difficult to even find the right place. Solve that. Go to 5. And let's select these two. Go to F6. Geo, create, 3D model, sorry, create, mesh from points and legacy. And you can see we're sort of building up the shape of the building, just the profile. We're not planning on doing the whole thing. We just want to get a nice profile of this. So we probably want to add some more points. Sorry, we always seem to be adding more and more points. But it will definitely be worth it once you've finished it. I just want to try and get these as accurate as possible. So I can kind of see that's in the wrong place. So I'm using other things as point reference. Can be quite difficult to find the right place sometimes. Definitely got that in the wrong place on one of them. Let's see. Cool. In fact, let's delete that. Let's go for something. I don't know why I was going for that bit. It's quite difficult to even see when we can have probably the tip of this triangle a bit. It's probably a lot easier to see. Just trying to get those edges just so it's easier to model, but sometimes it's easier to go for the clearer point. Once we solve that, hopefully our deviation's not so bad. So we'll just go to F5. And select that point, that one. Might as well get all three of these. And we'll go F6. 3D model. Mesh from points and legacy. Create mesh. And we see we're starting to build out this profile of this building now. We're not going to be able to get all of it, but we can probably get a fair chunk of good reference geometry. So I'm just going to do that top bit as well. Just going from create, mesh points, legacy. I'll press F5 now. We see we're starting to build some really accurate geometry. And a lot of this stuff we can just extrude down. We can do some test points, but most of the time we've got all our proportions pretty accurate. So yeah, so we're gonna just keep going through and do that. Let's just do this one as well. Any sort of geometry is going to help us while modeling, even if it's not quite complete. It will save us putting in loads of geometry. You know what, we can also select that one. Let's go for this corner window. Let's do one more, then I think we're probably exhausted the sort of... We've got a really good profile of this building now. And you might not even need the whole building. I'm just doing it, most of it, for example. So when you can bring this into Maya, you got some really good reference to sort of build from. Just solve that. Just press F5. Just going to select that point. This point. Go to F6. Just build some geometry from that. And we can see, even though like some of our shapes are not obviously the correct shape, but we're getting this correct profile of the building, which is what we want. Probably want to save that as well. Let's save this, because we haven't saved it in a while. In fact, we haven't saved it at all, which is would be horrendous if I had to redo that. So let's make sure we save it. I haven't called this a name. We just called it MM227 set build. Cool, so I'm pretty sure you get the idea of this now. So you can either go through and continue, or just use it as sort of a knowledge base to sort of, so you kind of understand why I'm doing this. Let's have a look at the... Let's not worry about that one. So what we can also do, if we go to our lens, because we just left it as 35, we can also click adjust. And when we adjust this, our geometry will adjust as well. So if we parameter adjust, put it on adaptive, and this will sort of fine tune our lens. And we're not so worried about deviation on this. The deviation height doesn't really matter. It does, but obviously you want... It's a different way to look at it. There's some points that are clearly not quite aligned or don't have enough overlap. But our premise for this is to build this sort of outline. So we can continue with this. It just takes quite a long time. I'm not sure how much you want to watch through this. And we could probably pick the rest of this up in Maya. So I feel like we're pretty much done with this, and we can finish off some of the rough blocking in Maya afterwards. So you can continue placing more points, and obviously the more points you have, the easier it will be for you to model. Or you can just bring it into Maya now and can finish it off, and it'll probably be just a lot quicker just bringing it to Maya now. So what we'll do is render off our undistorted plates, because we still need to undistort our plates. So we'll just go to run waterfall. saved footage. If you go browse, so old one. So if we actually call it UDP, select OK there. So now we're saving it in the UDP. We've not named it because we can keep it the same name. And source footage. I don't think you can. How many have we got to do? So if we just select that one, render. I don't think you can do them separately through this way, but it means that we don't have to then go into Nuke or Natron and then export out our LD nodes. We can just quickly render them off this way. I know it's a bit manual, but it's not ideal, but it saves out having to open up more software just to get these undistorted. And these should be just naming them with UDP at the end, or UD, or dewarped, I think usually it's called. So it's not. It's up to you. You can take this into Nuke or Natron. But for me, this is just a lot easier now. I want to try and reduce the amount of different types of software I'm going into when I'm doing this. It's not taking that long. Let's just check I'm not being stupid, and no, you definitely can't select multiple. It doesn't take that long. It just saves you having to open up different software. But obviously this is a bit of a pain. Cool, and the last one. Cool, we can close that. We've done that, so our final thing would be export out our camera. So export the project, export Maya. It doesn't matter what start frame we start on. We can export all cameras. All this set build cams VO1 cams. Select OK. Then what we'll do, we'll export out our geometry separately as well. So we'll select all our point mesh, press F6, 3D models, export 3D model as OBJ, and we'll call this PC mesh for point cloud mesh VO1. We're pretty much done in the 3D side of it. You can continue doing more if you want, but I think you kind of got the idea of what we're doing. We're building this sort of profile. Then we can build more with the point cloud in Maya, and it'll be a lot easier modeling in Maya, not having to do all these points. But we've created quite a good what would be called a conform scene, where we've got multiple cameras matching and creating point depth, and it's all worked really well. So save it, and if you've enjoyed this tutorial, hit that like button and subscribe for more like this.